So the series that I'm doing is called 48 Ways to Wisdom. And I'm really excited to do this because this is a classic series of Rav Noach Weinberg. He created this 50 years ago. And he's been teaching, he taught it to students for decades and decades. And it's unbelievable. I've never taught it before. I've learned it, but never taught it. I'm very excited to be doing it. So what is the 48 Ways to Wisdom? It actually comes from a Mishnah, part of the oral law in Pirkei Avos, right? Ethics of our fathers. And the Mishnah starts off by saying that Torah is even greater than being a Kohen, being a priest, or being a king. And it goes on to say why. Because the Torah has 48 attributes, 48 ways you can acquire the Torah, and it's more impressive and it's open to the entire Jewish people. There are 48 different ways to acquire wisdom in the world. And Rabbi Weinberg, and he used to say on the introduction to the series, if you get the tape series, which is still available on the MP3 site, he always said, you want to be a millionaire? 48 ways. You want to get gold in the Olympics? 48 ways. It'll get you anywhere you want to go. And he basically said it's like 48 ways to success. He would say success, he'd almost put in wisdom equals success. 48 ways to success. But the Mishnah says wisdom. And I always was wondering, why did the rabbi associate wisdom so in lockstep with success? Meaning whatever you want in life, all you need are these 48 ways for wisdom. And, it's very interesting because it really builds on a question that was asked last week to my brother at the end of the class. He was talking about knowledge of God, to know God, the mitzvah of knowing God. And somebody asked at the end, okay, once you know there's a God, like now what? What's the day 2 assignment? Like after I'm a knower of God, okay, isn't that just like a jumping off point? Why is that a constant mitzvah? Why is that something I have to keep refreshing, keep deepening? I know who God is. I know who God is. So I was thinking about that. I thought it was a very nice question. And I looked back. Right in the beginning of the Torah, it says, Ha'adam yada eschava ishto. The man knew his wife, Eve. V'tahar v'teled. And she got pregnant and gave birth. The Torah actually uses the word knowledge as a euphemism for intimate relationships, intimate sexual relations. The biblical knowledge. That's pretty wild. And what comes out of that is that real knowledge is a connection on all levels, physical, spiritual, and emotional. The deepest connection you can have to someone, the Torah calls that knowledge, the biblical knowledge. So really I said to my friend Steve, who asked that question, that knowing God means connecting to God on all levels. Physical, spiritual, and emotional. That's a lifelong game. That's what life's really about. That's why knowledge is the pathway towards a relationship and a connection with God. And I wanted to go even further. People have under a misimpression in the world about what real advances are in the world. And I always say that if you ask somebody, how did we get to the moon? They would say, of course, Rabbi, we got to the moon. Didn't you see the Apollo rocket ship? That's how we got to the moon. And I would always say to them, that's not how we got to the moon. How we got to the moon is that some scientists had ideas that would make space travel possible. Ideas about gravity, ideas about propulsion, ideas about friction, all the different ideas that they refined as they built various prototypes, those rockets. Remember, they had to build prototypes. They had to keep testing. When they got to the moon, you know what the real advance for mankind was when they got to the moon? It wasn't the tin can rocket ship. It was the fact that they uncovered truth about life. Reality. They uncovered a piece of reality about life. And that reality, interestingly enough, was there before the rocket ship, waiting for man to uncover it. they connected to a piece of truth, a piece of reality. And I know Eric Hirsch is on the line here, but I remember talking to his boss once. He took Star Wars technology, from the Reagan era. Star Wars, the technology, which is like the basis of the Patriot missile system that the Israelis are using, that's Star Wars technology. He took that technology, an aspect of it, a truth that scientists uncovered, and he applied it to esophageal reflux tests, the endoscopy that I've taken many times. Maybe you guys have taken as well. There was a piece of truth, a piece of wisdom that he grabbed onto. And that perhaps is more real than the spaceship itself. That's the most enduring thing. Think about it another way. Say a person makes their living as a salesman or as a car mechanic. So a person who fixes a car, everybody's looking at the car and they think, okay, that's the product. The product is the car. If a salesman sells a car, okay, you judge him on the product he sells. But maybe the real product is not the car, but the product is the person. What do I mean by that? The wisdom acquired by that person, that is the real product. The guy who knows how to fix the carburetor, he has to understand truth, understand reality. When he works hard, he's disciplined, he does all these things to fix the car. He's changing himself. He's acquiring wisdom. It's as if he's the product himself. One last example. Imagine you're a composer and you create the most beautiful symphony. So let me ask you, it's a funny perspective, but if you're a composer and you create a symphony, does the composer contain the symphony that he created? I would say he does. I would say that beautiful symphony that the composer created is more a part of him, is more real than the actual music he creates. Now we're faked out because we live in a physical world. When we look at that music and that harmony, that symphony as the end result. But really, the composer is the music. The architect is the building. God, who created the world, we're fixated on the world, but really, God is the world. God is the Torah that he creates. So when you kind of look at it this way, the game of life is really to acquire wisdom. And when you're going out in the various jobs you have and in your various relationships with your kids and your husband, you think you're working on that relationship with your kids and your husband, and you're for sure doing it. But the real creation there is you. You're changing, you're growing, you're becoming something. Imagine if from God's perspective, and I think this is the truth, from a Jewish point of view, you are really the product that he created the whole world for. All these other activities that we do are just motifs, different ways for us to create the product. But you are the product, my friends. We are the product. Now, if you have this as a bit of a backdrop, now you can understand why wisdom is so important, why uncovering this truth is so important, because in so doing, you're really creating who you are and your connection to God. Now, one last point before we go right into the practical aspect of this is that the word for truth in Hebrew, it's very cool. The word for truth is emet, aleph, mem, and tav. It's an acronym. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Tav is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the mem is in the middle. Emet is truth subsumes A to Z, so to speak, aleph to tav. And that is God's seal. God's seal is truth. God created that world out of the aleph base. So we say, when you uncover a piece of truth, you're really connecting to God in a very, very deep way. So there are 5 aspects to the first 48 way. The first 48 way is but Talmud. But Talmud means with study. With study. Now, it's interesting because the Mishnah doesn't say to study. You might have thought that the first of the 48 ways to wisdom is study. It doesn't say study. It says bit Talmud, with study. I think what that means is it's opening this up to something much wider than studying out of a book, right? Because it's not just the act of studying, which you and I normally associate with just Torah learning in a book. We're talking about being a studier of life. Now that jives a lot more with what I was saying a minute ago, that the real job is to study. And it's not just when you're learning. It's not just when you're at work. It's 24/7, all the days of your life. So the first of the aspect of the 48 ways is that your study's got to be constant. Your study's 24/7, okay? We're going to list these and then go through them a little more slowly. But the first of the 48 way of with study is constant. Not only does it have to be constant, it's got to be continuous. In other words, whether you're studying for an hour, whether you're studying for 3 hours, whatever your activity is that you're focusing on, it should be continuous, no breaks. You shouldn't break it up. Number 3, it should be consistent. Consistent means same place, same time. We'll explain later why that's so. It should be repetitive. If it's really important to you, you're going to want to get it into your bones. Remember, we talked about this being the 48 ways to acquire wisdom. Acquire wisdom means you got to make it part of you. That's why it's got to be repetitive. And the last one is pervasive. Pervasive means you're always a studier. You're always doing studying. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Constant, 24/7, you should be studying. Now, when I tell that to people, they get a little nervous because it doesn't sound like a lot of fun. You know, it sounds a little bit like pressurized, doesn't it? To say that I have to study 24/7. So Rabbi Weinberg would give the following analogy. It's such a beautiful analogy. And he would say, imagine you're on a bus. And I remember when I was in Jerusalem, there was long bus rides through the religious neighborhoods. And he said, you're sitting next to a fellow. He's next to the window, and you're next to him. And about every 5 minutes, he takes out 100 shekels, and he throws it out the window. 5 minutes later, another 100 shekels. And this pattern goes on all the way from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. Now, you're like shocked, like, what is going on with this guy? And right at the end, when he gets down to his stack of 100 shekel notes is gone, he turns to you and he said, buddy, can I borrow 100 shekels? That's what he says to you. Now, you say that you look at him, are you crazy? You just threw a stack of 100 shekel notes out the window and you're asking me to borrow money? By the way, this is what we do to God every year on Rosh Hashanah, because we're that guy next to the window and we throw 100 shekel, $100 notes out of the window of our bus regularly. And you know what that is? We kill time. It's like throwing $100 out of the window, probably much more than $100. We sit on that bus, we're spacing out half the time, we're looking at the scenery, hour goes by, oh my gosh, I'm ready to get off the bus in Tel Aviv. So what have we effectively done? We've thrown life out of the window. He used to say this was committing suicide, but it's only in installments, so we don't notice it so much. God forbid, none of us would ever take the final exit. But you have to realize we commit suicide in installments on the installment plan all the time. So he would say, just focus your attention. What's more precious, 5 minutes of life or 100 shekel note? And therefore, when you understand, it's when you kill time, you're killing life. So he would say, no one wants to kill life. That's why you want to be 24/7 on acquiring wisdom. Now, another thing you have to know, and he would call this the myth, the killer myth of Western society is, in Western society, for some reason, pain to us, struggle, effort is pejorative. People don't like pain. So why would you not want to be studying 24/7, studying life, trying to be engaged? Because somehow you think it's painful. You know, it's difficult. I remember that Thomas Jefferson said, you know, many people will do almost anything rather than think because it was too painful. It's difficult. It seems like it's exerting a lot of effort. So Rabbi Weinberg would say, he said, people who equate pleasure with comfort really never get any true pleasure in life. In other words, comfortable is space out in front of the TV. Don't take pain, like in the gym, right? No pain, no gain. No, don't do that. That's bad. Don't take pain. Rather be comfortable on your hammock with a pina colada in your hand, just about asleep. That's comfort. That's a real drive in Western society. We're driven for comfort, but we make the mistake that comfort's pleasure. Comfort's not really pleasure. Comfort's just the absence of pain. If I'm in pain and my air conditioning in my car is broke and I'm really suffering, when I get it fixed, I'm not really in pleasure. I'm now just in comfort. True pleasure, everyone that knows has accomplished anything in their lives, true pleasure, the price tag is usually effort and struggle. Any parents here? Like most of you are parents on the line. If I ask you, what is your greatest pleasure? Most parents say, my children. And then I ask them, what's your greatest pain? Children. And I told you this before when Rabbi Weinberg asked me that. I told him when he said, what's your parents' greatest pain? I said, my brother, Mitch. He's the greatest pain. I'm the greatest pleasure. None of you can really do that because you don't have twin brother, twin sister. And I was able to do that. But the point is, we have to get out of that idea of not taking pain in life. We should change it, reframe it, struggle, effort. It's like someone who likes playing chess. They don't look at it as painful, the thinking, the moves. They know that's the game. And more than that, what if you knew you were getting paid for that? Every bit of effort you were putting in to your life and into studying, and into growing, and into changing, you were getting paid for, you were on the clock at work, how would you look at it then? But as I'm explaining it, and in terms of Jewish philosophy, that's how God looks at it. You are on the clock when you leave the office. And that's the big mistake I think all of us make in life. Rabbi Weinberg used to do this all the time. He would say, what do you do? What do you do? He would say, I'm a lawyer. I'm a doctor. I'm an accountant. And he would say, that's not the right answer. Imagine you walked over to a guy who just got a cup of coffee at the office, and you said to him, what do you do? He says, I'm a coffee drinker. You're a coffee drinker? Yeah, I love my coffee. I'm a coffee drinker. He says, no, you're not a coffee drinker. You just happen to be drinking coffee right now. So too, you're not a lawyer and a doctor. That's not your purpose in life. That's just how you pay the bills. But in our society, we've kind of made that our identity. But what if your identity was, let me call a bigger term. What if your identity was truth seeker, wisdom seeker, reality seeker, happiness seeker? It's all the same. They're all different aspects of the same thing. And that really was in your mind, your job. That my job and my opportunity is to go through my life trying to acquire happiness. Now, isn't that a 24/7 occupation that you could relate to? Isn't that a 24/7 occupation you'd be interested in? That's really what we're talking here with this idea of the Talmud. And he used to give us a little tip. I remember he said, how to deal with pain. And he would say, the only way to deal with pain is to focus on the pleasure. In other words, anybody in the gym, the only reason he takes those barbells and lifts them up is because he has a strong connection to the muscles that they're going to create, to the gold medal they're going to win, to the child I'm going to produce by taking the pain of the diapers and raising this child. Everybody is connected for them to keep going with the pleasure, which is a little bit more long run, right? It takes a little maturity, and not with the pain. We've got to apply that to all areas of our life. How many of us, and I'm talking to myself included, how many of us use this at work? We are accountable for our time. We're always trying to grow. We're always trying to do the best for our employer with integrity and everything else. And then when is the moment we got to work, it's like now I can just let my hair down and can veg out. And I just kind of go on autopilot for the rest of the time. A lot of us do that. That's where we're prone to doing that. But if we knew that our job was not really that those 8 hours during the day, that's really just how we're getting our bills paid. and we relate it to our life like a business, our whole lives could change. Make your life your business. Use business acumen for your life. That's the idea of constant. The other thing is that everything we're going to talk about in these 48 ways takes practice. If you see an idea that I say to you that resonates, work on it. Just because you got it in your head doesn't mean you got it in your bones. That's a very big, important idea in Jewish philosophy. That's why we do mitzvahs again and again and again on a daily basis, because we want to get it into our very bones. Now, Rabbi Weinberg would say, and I think it's a beautiful idea, is that when you leave work, why don't you have a few things, or not just work, whenever you're on the run, whenever you go from one activity to the other, when you're in the car, when you drive up to the country, you're taking the kids to camp, have a few things, 3 or 4 things on your mind to work on. You know, I've got an issue with my oldest child. We have a little sensitive, and it's hurting him. I see it's hurting him. How can I help my oldest child? That's a topic that when you're in the neutral spaces in life, think about that topic. Right? I've been trying to work on my health for such a long time now. I'm not doing well. Think about that when I'm on the way to the doctor's office. Have a few topics. You'd even say write them down on an index card. And when you're on that bus to Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, have those ideas that you're thinking about. Now, you would also say, what this helps you do is it helps you shift gears. Imagine you're working and you're kind of getting overheated, your brain's getting overheated, or you're studying, your brain's getting overheated. So our tendency is just kind of to relax and to just shut off. He would say, you know what, before you relax, before you shut off, how about shifting gears? In other words, don't think about this problem now, this issue. Shift to something else. Shift to something you enjoy. I happen to enjoy certain ideas. So at the end of this class, as an example, if you had 2 ideas that you like, write it down on an index card, and then when you're on that bus or when you get out of work, think about the idea. What does that idea mean to me? How can I put that idea into practice in my life? Rabbi Barnett said in his life, this is how he understands the idea. But what about my life? You can have it's actually very enjoyable, very pleasurable to have this kind of opportunity. Now, what's the greatest thing to think about? The granddaddy of all things to think about? Really, it's what am I living for? Now, in Judaism, we have answers to that question, but that's the most important question of all, because every other question is a subset of that question, right? Everything in life that you're doing, that we're all doing, the way we organize our lives, all are pursuant to the answer to the question, what am I living for? Really. And if you don't have an answer to that question, talk to me. No, think about it. Got to think about that question, or else you're just kind of bumping around the dark, hoping you'll figure it out, hoping you'll bump into the right answer. What am I living for? He would point to the story of the binding of Isaac. Such a beautiful, such an amazing story. And he said, when God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, he wasn't telling him to go kill Isaac. What he was saying when he basically told him, don't kill Isaac. He said, you know what I want you to do? I want you to know what you're willing to die for it and live for it instead. But I had to put you in a situation where you were willing to say, what am I willing to die for? What is worth dying for? And my children, don't die for it. Live for it. And if you're going to live for it, be happy about it. That's what Rabbi Weinberg would always tell us. Amazing, amazing piece of advice. Okay. Number 2 is continuous study. Because you have a body. We all have a body. And our body is lazy. Have you noticed that? Your body's lazy? Your soul wants what I'm talking about intuitively. But your body is heavy and lazy and dragging along. So we got to help the body along. So how do we help the body along? One of the ways is put it in good situations. We call it systematic. We don't want it to put you in a situation where you're going to fail because of systematic constraints. So put the body in a good situation. When you're learning, it should be consistent, meaning don't lose your focus. Remember when you guys were in college and you went and learned. We all knew this. Some study sessions, you got up 20 times. Go to the bathroom, to get a coffee, to walk around and stretch your legs. But there were other sessions, or there were other students that you were envious of who would sit there with a focus from beginning to the end. We say it's better to sit uninterrupted studying 1 hour straight with a focus than to study 4 hours with about 40 interruptions. And that's because the human being works like an onion. You go deeper and deeper and deeper the more you focus. If you're always starting the car, stopping the car, starting the car, stopping the car, you never really get beyond the surface level. So Jewish wisdom says, build up your capacity to focus. Now, in our generation, that's very difficult. This ADD generation, the technology and everything in our society is against us focusing. But the rabbis say your mind is a muscle. You can actually get it to focus more and more. Take 5 minutes a day and say, I'm going to focus on this piece of learning. Or apply it to your relationships. When you're with your wife or with your husband or with your children, I'm going to focus on my child now uninterrupted. No cell phone, not going to get up, I'm not going to get distracted. And sure as shooting, if you start with 5 minutes, you'll be able to up it to 6. You'll go to 6, you'll go to 10. Pretty soon you'll be able to focus your energy and attention, and you'll be able to accomplish exponentially more than what you would starting, stopping. Okay, first is constant, second is continuous. The third is consistent. What's consistent? Consistent is habituate your body into good habits. You know, many of you probably do this already. Many of you maybe work out 6 o'clock, 6:15 every day at that particular time. Because you and I and all of us know as you get older that when you lock yourself into a schedule with a consistent, whether it's studying, whether it's working out, whether it's date night with your wife, whatever it is, you are ingraining a help to accomplish it and keep it going because you've habituated your body into a good habit. Our bodies get habituated very easily into bad habits and into good habits. So when you can fit something consistently with a schedule, it's going to really help you. That's why we have classes in college. It's the same time every day, 9 o'clock in the morning, 3 days a week, 10 to 12, 2 days a week. It's not random because your body gets habituated. Okay, I'm ready to work now. When you get up in the morning and you go to the gym, okay, my body's ready. I'm ready to go. Very important. Consistent. So we got constant, continuous, and consistent. Okay, the next part of the Talmud is over and over. And I was saying it before. We have to get over the idea that this is painful. Right? Doing review, going over something again, going a little deeper again. This is where you make your money. This is where you make something, a good idea that someone has told me that resonates with me into change in myself. Now, I just want to throw this out, and I'm very prone to this. I love ideas. So when someone tells me a good idea, I really resonate with it. I have a feeling that I fulfill the idea just by understanding the idea. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. I almost feel like, hey, of course I should honor my mother and father. Of course that's true. But it hits me so deep, I almost feel like I did it. And then I have to remind myself and laugh, you didn't do anything. You're just getting started. Because unless you repeat that again and again and work it into your body, it's not going to be you. And the way you know it's you, it's not just when you know it, it's when you act upon it. That's why repetition over and over is so very, very important. Now, what are the other tips of the rabbis that Rabbi Weinberg gives? He says, create slogans for yourself. You know, I try to do this a lot. Like I say, happiness has more to do with wanting what you have than in having what you want. Happiness has more to do with wanting what you have rather than having what you want. That's a slogan. Another slogan, very, very good thing to understand, particularly in this context of learning in a consistent way. Shakespeare said, to be or not to be. That is the question. That's one of the most important statements I've ever heard, because it really is the heart of free will. Life's about engaging or disengaging, to live or to commit suicide, as I mentioned in installments. So the phrase to be or not to be, to engage or disengage, that's a slogan that is very motivating. It encapsulates a truth and it helps motivate you. And when that doesn't motivate you anymore, get another slogan to help motivate you. Very, very, very important. Now, the last piece is that this should be pervasive. You should feel, every one of us should feel, that all of the endeavors that God put me in are an opportunity to study. It's an opportunity to learn something about life, to learn something about myself, and to create something in myself. And to go back to what we said really, really in the beginning, that is the goal. It's not the symphony. You're the symphony. Any symphony, anything that you're going to create it in yourself in the most beautiful, pristine way. And that's the product that God is looking for. When you answer the question, what am I living for? Whatever that might be, to connect to God, to connect to truth, to be happy, all of that will end up when you create the person you were meant to be. The ultimate goal is for us to be creators like God. And we make the mistake and look at the external world and to things that people pay us for our essential creation. And they're all important and they're all great and you need to do them. But each of them signifies a much higher level of creation, and that's you. And that level of creation doesn't stop when you leave the office. That creation continues on the ball field with your children, with the way you treat your coworkers, and your relationship to God, and ultimately to yourself. That is the point of living. That's the business of living, and that's what it really means by Talmud. Okay, now I'm going to unmute anybody. This is going to end the formal part of the class. And if you have any questions, fire away. If anybody has any thoughts, if you want to add a thought, something that you enjoyed, go ahead, go for it.
To get started.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming. Where do you go? Where do you start?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm so glad you said that because I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I think.
Good, brilliant minds think alike.
What I was trying to do, particularly from the outset, is try to demystify what studying means. I mean, we generally look at studying as studying the Torah, studying a certain text or a certain, compilation of text. And what I want to say is, yes, that's one aspect of study. That's one and a very important aspect of study. But that's not the only aspect of study. Okay. Now, when it comes to a text, when it comes to any text or any part of Torah, you can use the ideas that I was talking about in those aspects of Torah, meaning that you should always have something to study, constant. It always should be something that you're studying. It shouldn't be like I study one day a week, and then I do maybe another day 2 weeks later, and then I do 5 days in a row, and then I do 1 day. In other words, it should be a constant refrain in your life, right? And also, it should be consistent, right? At the same time, so there's a focus. I mean, all those 5 things that I mentioned can be applied to studying anything that you're going to study from Torah, okay? But that's just one aspect of it. What I was really trying to go much further is that we're all supposed to be studying life. That's perhaps the greater area of study and even Torah learning. We're supposed to be studying life. So the idea there is you really want to have awareness that when I go and I'm working with my children, that I am trying to help them, but I'm trying to learn about how to be a good parent, and that's changing me as a person. Now, there's also areas of Torah and guidance in Torah for any one of these endeavors. So anybody can look into information about how to be a good parent, how to be a good husband, or many other things, how to be a good friend. There are a lot of pieces of Torah about that. But my point is that you have to look at the other areas of your life There's areas where you don't just turn your brain off. You're engaged. So there really were two aspects to this talk. One was actually when you're studying Torah, and that's something we could either talk personally, how do you start, what's the best thing, and that's going to change every person. But really the bigger issue I wanted to get out was studying in a larger context really means that when I leave the actual book that I'm learning, or I'm not at work where I'm also quote unquote studying and trying to make some money or trying to get ahead, that I'm using every opportunity in my life as a study opportunity. You might even say like learning from experience, right? Learning from the actual things in life, but don't just bump into it. Actually engage in the process. Now, does that help a little bit?
Yep.
You know, and I'm just saying that I think the most important thing is just to realize when you're off work, you're not off life. You got to look. I mean, probably the greatest way you can sum this up is treat your life like a business. The same way when I talk to you about your job, you probably relate to what I'm saying so much more easily. I got to focus. I don't want to stop and go to the water cooler 50 times. I have to be consistent. I have to set up my schedule in a way it's things every day helps me along. That, Lloyd, in your business, you're probably like right all over that, right? But take that acumen and apply it to when you're not in the office. That's called batalmud. That's called approaching life with study, with trying to engage and get something out of it. Great question. Anybody else? Okay. Well, listen, it was really one thing I want to end with because I just saw I didn't mention it, and it's worth ending with. You know, imagine when you get up to God in 120 years. When Abraham got up to heaven, when he ended and finished his life, it said, Bo B'yamin. He came with his days. Bo B'yamin. And it's a very famous phrase in the Bible. And one of the beautiful insights from that idea is that every day was like in his hand. He came with it. It wasn't wasted. It wasn't lost. It wasn't like he threw those $100 out of the window every 5 minutes. That's what we want to do to the extent we can. We want every day to be with us when we finish our life. That everything we do should create that person that we were. And, if you met a person you went to high school with, and you haven't seen him since you were 18 years old, now I'm like 58 now. For 40 years, I haven't seen this guy that I was very friendly with when I was 18. If I saw this guy today at 58, and he was doing the same stuff he was doing when he was 18, that would be a tragedy, right? That would be the ultimate tragedy, that he's 58 and he's 18 in what he's really accomplished. But what about us? Now, I was 58 years ago. How different am I now, 8 years later, than I was 8 years ago? Now, some of us can say we're very different. Some of us can say we really have changed and grown. But can we all say that? Or measure against what I could have done? Am I really coming with every day in hand? That's the opportunity of the Talmud, of constant study, is that we have to apply Shakespeare, to be or not to be, to every second of our lives, to engage. Imagine if we engaged in everything we were doing. Now, most of us fetch that we have to do 40% of the things we're doing. It's like my kid, when I'm setting him to school now on the Zoom calls, he's fetching more effort fetching than he's spending on the effort that he could have by engaging. So we all know if we all just engaged, if you did one thing, you engaged more often than you disengaged on a daily basis, engage more than you disengage, we would become greater human beings, and we would come with more of those days, Shem, at the end of 120. That's my blessing to everybody, that we really get that in our bones, that it's a good thing to engage. It's a good thing. We got to do it anyway. Most of the things we're doing in life, we got to do it anyway. So why do we kick and scream emotionally on so many of the things we're doing? How much do I do it a lot. I'm talking to myself. I kick and scream emotionally, but I got to do it anyway. Wouldn't it be simpler if I would just engage in whatever I'm doing? The good stuff I'm doing, the not so good stuff I'm doing, the annoying stuff I'm doing, engage and try to get out of it the learning. Because that's the idea. It's not about do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it? It ain't about that. It's much more about what's the opportunity that God's putting in front of me right now. Let me soak it up. But the prerequisite to soaking it up means I first got to engage. I first got to approach it with but calm, with the idea that I'm trying to get something. If I don't approach it that way, it's going to be lost on me. Okay, my friends, listen, I don't want to keep anybody, so please drop off if you want to drop off, or if you want to ask any more questions, I'll stay on the line a little bit longer.